Cheers, thank you.
There we go. Firstly, thank you so much. We're sorry we're late. This feels so small. I feel like I could just put this down and bring everyone like one step closer.
We should just have a coffee, actually.
Yeah, I shouldn't have had a coffee. Very good point. I'm going to go straight into it because I'm very, very available and wary of the fact that we don't have much time because we came in late because we were standing at the wrong stage, which is a bit embarrassing. But here we are now. The first thing is to say, I am Jason Allen Scott. It was behind me on a board. There it is there. And with me is Charles Simmons.
Hi, nice to meet you.
There we go. I wanted to talk about Web3 because of the importance of Web3 right now, more than ever, and especially in our industry. And I did a bunch of conversations with people from our industry about where do you stand. And there seems to be two lines. It's going to ripple through everything and change our industry in a way that we've never seen. And there was the opposite side who said, Web3, never heard of it, it's not going to do anything, there's no such thing. Or can you explain it in under 140 words, as if it was a tweet? And I was trying to say that the web itself is kind of like Nike shoes. The very first Nike Airs were just Nike Airs, and the next Nike Airs were Nike Airs, and the Nike Air after that, and the Nike Chicago, and the Jordan ones. No one at any stage went, this is 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0 because no one cared. And it's kind of like that in the web. The only reason we now care about Web 1, I see you looking at your shoes, Web 2 and Web 3 is because we're trying to explain what the differences are. It's only in that differentiation that we've created a category called Web 3. Much like when we're trying to work out where we are in our adulthood, we're like, well, we're not quite teens, we're tweens, etc., etc. But I wanted to bring an expert, someone that understands the space, someone that has lived through Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. And for all the ladies watching, I apologize that I got a white man to do that. Apologies. And another white man to explain it, which just feels terrible, especially in today's climate. Come on through. But Charles has been there through Web 1, through Web 2, and Web 3, and now runs a Web 3 company that helps people move into this brand new and exciting space. So Charles, without further introduction, I'd love you to mention some things about yourself.
Okay, well, good to see you all. I'm Charles Simons, and I run a company called Buzzmint.com, which is a SaaS-based platform. And we allow brands, publishers, sports companies, fashion developers to ideate and create their own sort of Web3 projects through the creation of NFTs and tokens. I'm still trying to get the shoe analogy in terms of where Web 1 and Web 2 and Web 3 came from, because you've gone from one end to the other end, and most people say, well, how do we understand Web 3? Well, we can only understand Web 3 in the context of where Web 1 and Web 2 came from. So if Web 1 was essentially read-only, so if you think about it as you're into football, you want to go and see a football match, okay? So, but you don't know where to find the football pitch. You don't know where the game's happening. That's essentially Web 1, because there were no search capabilities to find basically the sites you were looking for. So Web 2, as some of you will probably know, obviously is known as the social web, where further interaction was allowed to happen. We were able to contribute to user-generated content. And for me, I mean, talking about sort of, this is the key difference in between Web 2 and Web 3, is that user-generated content is great under the rules and basically how the platforms operated, Facebook and mining your data in exchange for actually using their publishing platforms, whereas Web3 is about basically user-generated content and ownership, which we've talked about quite a lot. So in a really bad way, that's kind of how I see Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3.
Within Web 1 and Web 2 and Web 3, there were all these words, all these difficult, highfalutin, hard to say, harder yet to explain terminologies.
Decentralization, democratization.
Immutable, non-fungible.
Yeah, none of them are particularly helpful.
No.
No.
And the reason I wanted to do this is because I host a podcast show. It's called Not Another Crypto Show. And the theory behind it is, how do I explain this to someone as if I am 5 years old? How do I explain this to a client? How do I explain this to my friends? And why it's so important? And I thought you had a really great story about when you were in Web 2 and how a certain startup came and said, hey, we've got this technology, would you like to invest, would you be interested in it?
Yeah, well, so just walking around the event today, so I'm looking at some of the other stands, I've talked to some of the exhibitors here, and as you said, they broadly fall into two different camps. There are those people who believe that, for example, non-fungible tokens or NFTs, which are essentially digital code which signify ownership of an asset or a piece of IP, are vaporware and not applicable to their industry. And then there are other companies, a couple of them around the corner, who believe Web3 is going to intrinsically change the way that events happen, from ticketing to community involvement to whatever it is.
To funding.
To funding. Funding being a massive one. So looking at, funding for events is typically seasonal and it creates massive cash flow problems. But for the ones who were skeptics of Web3, and I'll be honest, rather ironically, I'm one of them, actually, and even though actually I run a blockchain company, is relating back to a story within Web2, which I was part of. We had a company which was very successful. It was a bricks and mortar company. We were producing revenue. We were basically like Reuters Online, but for the IT industry. And that was in 1999, and a few people walked into our office off the King's Road and asked us whether we wanted to buy some shares in a little startup called PayPal.
Anybody heard of PayPal? Just in case. There we go. We saw a hand in the back.
No. And nobody did. So that was one of the, mainly because nobody believed that that form of payment would actually ever transpire or become a reality or have a positive impact on the way business was done. And the one thing about Web3, it's such a nebulous term, and most of the technology is nascent. It's moving, it's developing at the moment, but it shouldn't be discounted simply because often it gets conflated with crypto. And we saw obviously events this week with FTX going under, which has rippled out into the blockchain environment. I've kind of forgotten where I was going on that one, actually.
Well, I wanted you to bring up the story because you were someone that was in Web 1, you were in Web 2, PayPal comes in with this opportunity that could change the world. At the time you say, I don't understand it. At the time you go, it's not going to catch on, it won't be a thing. But then years later, you are at a talk, if I'm right, and you hear about Web 3. And you hear about this opportunity that's coming, this idea that it's for the people, by the people, that potentially Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, is on stage explaining to you. You turn to your friend, you have nothing to do with this Indian industry anymore, and you say, we should start a Web3 business. And he says, yeah, we should. Let's not make another PayPal mistake. And next thing you know, you're in your 40s and 50s in an incubator with a bunch of kids learning about Web3, learning about the technology, and then you're pitching to investors and trying to convince them of the technology and the idea and the applications. And now you sit here, invested, wonderful company, growing, supplying digital assets, even though some of us call it NFTs, to multiple industries, of which the events industry is one of those winners in your space.
Absolutely. Again, completely transparent, the reason for us getting into the Web3 and inverted commas environment was because I had a meeting with a good friend of mine who's an editor of a national newspaper, and who's bemoaning the fact that basically their readership circulations were declining, their ad revenue is declining. They were genuinely frightened about the future of their publishing business, which included events, by the way, and mainly because they saw social media decimated the idea of community. So I'll take this event. So I had numerous emails from Event Tech Live, and they were all asking me to share my experience or share the fact I was coming here with my community. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're not my community. They're people who we know. So they're work colleagues, they're friends, they're family, and essentially one of the biggest USPs, if you think of decentralization and ownership of your own data and digital assets, is actually bringing communities back together. And one of the ways to do that is, for example, for the events industry, it's issuing tickets as NFTs, which can then be used to give access essentially as a digital key to centralized, well not centralized, but walled websites where they could have exclusive information about that event afterwards, where sponsors can begin to interact with exhibitors post-exhibit, where they can be then invited to contribute to how an event is organized the next time, what subjects are covered, and so on and so forth. So,
one of the things you said to me was, walking around here, you were like, there's a real opportunity for this thing called POET, if memory serves.
oh, well, POAPs.
POAPs, thank you. Can you explain POAPs as an idea?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, POAPs are really, really simple. So if you arrive at this event, you'd go and register for to create a digital wallet, a blockchain wallet, and the event organizer would send you a non-fungible token. So they would send you an NFT, and that could be a piece of artwork that maybe one of the exhibitors has produced. But it's essentially, it's a ticket stub. Okay. So I used to collect ticket stubs all the time, you know, well, not ticket stubs, but match day programs for following football, right? Because people like collecting stuff at the end of the day. But POAPs in their current form for other events I've been to are completely pointless in that literally the event organizer is sending them just, you know, a heavily logoed NFT of everybody who's at the event. Well, it doesn't do anything. But I think POAPs, in terms of where Web3 is concerned, could do something for this event if actually you sent them something of value. And you've got to think of a POAP as in the form of a digital key. It unlocks whatever the organizer who wants it to unlock. That could be free entry to another event further down the year. That could be an invitation to participate in how the event is organized, some of the points I mentioned earlier.
It's not me, I promise.
It's this is interesting next door. So, building community for events companies to dip their toe in the water. I completely understand people's reticence in terms of Web3 applications for the event industry, but there are so many opportunities to build it out, and one of them, of course, is ticketing. Ticketing is massive, perhaps not for an industry event of this nature, but for more sort of high-profile consumer-led events. Ticket scalping is a massive problem. Reselling is a massive problem. Blockchain technology enables tickets to be produced immutably in the form of tokens. Their resale value can be controlled. And because there's only one version of that ticket, ever, on the blockchain, it can't be replicated. You're eradicating fraud and looking at other issues.
I want to ask a question on that. So I'm an event organizer. I organize this event. And I say to you, I want to do all the tickets as a digital asset.
Yeah.
And I want to build in to that asset, for those people that are buying a ticket, certain classes or systems, right? So like one allows them to come to a talk, one allows them into like the VIP area, one allows them into the after party. Can I create all of that using blockchain technology and smart contracts?
We did it for a big event in New York 2 weeks ago. So essentially they were launching a new news service. So it's very well funded, big audience. That's exactly what they use their POAP for. So in fact, they fragmented a piece of artwork, but anybody who downloaded the POAP when they came in, that token stays in their wallet. It gave exclusive access to certain events. It even gave access to one-on-one content. It gamified the experience of going to the event. And I think, maybe like for events companies, being in that business myself before in a previous life, we're so worried about metrics and gathering data and, how can we harvest as much data and metrics as we possibly can, and what we should be more concerned about is what the experience is like. And if you can gamify that experience and dip your toe into the Web3 market, then you're onto a winner. Because why wouldn't you?
I think a lot of people aren't doing it now because it feels so new. And what's new is often felt as scary, right? I mean, I have crypto assets, I have digital assets, but I'm still scared to put it on a crypto wallet, for example. But I was talking to you, and you were showing me this cartoon graphic of like the basic technologies that we take for granted now aren't even accepted everywhere all the time. That is definitely not me. Did you want to share something on that?
Yeah, the thing about any kind of, so during the dot-com boom, right, the dot-com boom, as probably some of anybody who's lived through that will know it's like any other technology boom, okay? So it's overvaluation, overvalued products, overvalued companies, everybody jumping on the bandwagon. We've got the same issue with Web3 at the moment, is that VCs are piling into this industry. They're piling huge sums of money into it, and they're trying to convince everybody that Web3 and blockchain is the way forward. We have a blockchain and Web3 SaaS-based platform. I personally don't believe everything needs to be decentralized. I think there's going to be an element of centralization for a lot of industries. There's going to be a midpoint. And the thing about any kind of technological evolution is you don't know what it looks like until it actually happens. But it's not going anywhere. And you'll see every single major brand in the world at the moment is investing and looking and exploring real-world applications of blockchain technology that actually do some good and are not based on speculative asset flipping.
One of the things that I liked about this space, besides the fact that it can rally a community, that it can get its attendees to become co-investors, that the attendees can decide on format of a show or who speaks, they can use it for voting power, etc., is the ability for the fact that you don't have to give all your data when you join. It doesn't need to know my birth date and my mother's maiden name and my social media handles, that I can choose what data goes where. And that makes me a proud component of the idea of Web3 or Web5. And I'll explain at the end what Web5 is.
I want to know your definition of Web5.
I'm looking forward to telling you my definition of Web5.
We're almost struggling with Web3 as it is. Actually,
yeah, right? It's a lot easier and cleaner than everything else. What was the thing for you, though, that made you think that this next evolution of the internet, this next evolution of this massive opportunity, which is the internet, is going to come in the forms of the tools, decentralization, smart contracts, a token of some kind that allows us to transact, something to hold, things like twinning. But what was it exactly that made you think there's an opportunity for me here where I can help lots of businesses make that transition in a very simple way? Because your platform is very simple. It doesn't come across as something highfalutin or hard to understand. It's not a Rosetta Stone. It's very simple. Do this, do this, do this, get this.
That's quite a wide-ranging question. I mean, we've talked about this before, but I think for me, the value exchange in Web 2, there's nothing intrinsically wrong. I mean, Web 2 is a great, technological evolution, okay? When the bubble burst, only a few companies survived. Everybody thought Amazon would fail, but it didn't. But the value exchange is intrinsically flawed, right? So people user-generated content, right? That is what we are mined for information. We are mined for our data by the big tech giants. We are mined for our content. We create content. User-generated content is touted all the time as a driving force in Web 2. You don't own that. You publish anything on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or any of the other big platforms, you don't own the content you're putting up there. The value exchange is we give everything and we keep nothing. And then actually, well, unless you're getting millions of views, in which case you might benefit from advertising revenue, the value exchange is intrinsically flawed. But from a provable sort of digital asset, if you're owning the content you're producing, if you've got the ability to sell that on your own terms, okay, I mean, we're probably going to run out of time, but let's look at some useful case studies of tokenization and NFTs. We're talking to a number of large production houses at the moment who produce TV programs, educational programs. They license out their content, their stock footage to loads of different companies all over the world. It's very difficult to track. But what they're interested in doing at the moment is turning all of their content into NFTs, right? So non-fungible tokens, which they can track, they can trace, they can see where it's being used, they can bake in the license agreements for how that content is being used. They don't have to tie up their entire legal department with basically issuing out new contracts every time they want to sell a piece of stock footage. Another good example, my daughter, bless her, works stupid hours in a care home looking after old people. She has an awful affliction for buying things like Balenciaga shoes and various other bits and bobs. I've tried to convince her not to, but she won't. She keeps on buying them. She tries to sell them. right? And then all the mates go, yeah, but they're fake, aren't they? Right? So they go, but they're not fake, actually. She paid a ton of money for them. Yeah. So fashion companies or luxury good manufacturers at the moment are issuing digital twins, so certificates of authenticity held on the blockchain to go with the physical product, which is great. But it shouldn't just be, the realm of fashion companies or Rolex or any other sort of luxury watch. It could be applied to pharmaceutical industries. It could be applied to educational resources. So the actual practical, we started Buzzment, right, in order to help publishing companies to realize the value of their legacy assets, because every single publishing company produces a ton of content which is disposable. So it's the old adage of today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip wrappers, right? But there's massive value in that fish and chip wrapper. It could be a story that it was a one-off. It could be a piece of historic news, and it just gets basically buried in a vault. So our idea was that we would create these into digital assets that people would like to buy, based on kind of the NFT model of OpenSea and Wearable and Super Air and so on. And thank God, I've suddenly discovered that the applications of our platform, which is essentially an engine, can be applied to much useful applications of blockchain technology. And the events industry, I honestly think, will be, whether we like it or not, probably in ways that we least expect, but will be transformed over the next sort of 3 to 5 years.
I personally am hoping for registration to be one of those things that it immediately fixes, let alone sharing with my community or handing over data. We've got 4 minutes left. If anyone has any particular questions, this is your opportunity to put them out there. And Charles, who's the expert, will be able to answer them. And if I know any answers, I'm happy to put myself forward. I saw that look when I said expert.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's an expert in this area, actually. I just think a lot of people have a lot of opinions and a little bit of knowledge, and collectively that could be a powerful thing. But yeah.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the talk. I see the potential. I'm just a bit of a skeptic. And so the example you gave of like a ticket, and then certain people could be offered things, I think, post the event. What's the difference between that and just using a person's name as a unique identifier? Why an NFT? It just feels with Web3, a lot of things are being created for the sake of the technology. They can all be done already. Blockchain, immutable databases can be done. What's so special? What's the essence? What's special? I don't know if it was on before. What's the essence of like an NFT?
Why digital assets?
Why does it make any different to an email address? That identifies me. That's unique.
Well, your email address does until your email address provider goes down, right? But I mean, I'm
Yahoo Mail hasn't gone down in 25 years. So.
Look, I'm kind of with you on what you've just said, right? So there's little point in doing something for the sake of doing it just so you can do it, and all a large proportion of ideas coming out of Silicon Valley or any other tech center are there to design to basically produce value where zero value sat before. Physical tickets deteriorate. Digital tickets, certainly held in the form of tokens on the blockchain, don't. And it belongs to you. It doesn't belong to you. My email address is an email address harvested by the event owner, right? So they're still using my data and communicating with me on their terms. Whereas actually, if I'm holding a digital ticket, that stays me for, I personally think for the events industry, eradicating fraud is probably a greater application than maybe a ticket stub, right? However, if you're going to dip your toe in the water and just do proof of appearance tokens, you can start building up your Web3 community. And why wouldn't you do that? Because you don't have to look at it. You can still have the NFT in your pocket, and it'd be interesting to see what it does in the future.
Perfect, thank you. Is there any more questions? Yeah.
What is Web5 and why should I care?
Yeah, I'm dying to hear the answer to that as well, actually.
So Jack Dorsey is alleged to have been the first person to say Web5. And his belief of Web 5 was that Web 3 is not truly decentralized, that the big VC firms like Sequoia are buying these companies that are owning the information, and if one company like Binance, who is a massive player right now, owns that information, they are not in any way decentralized. He also believed that if we constantly cutting up the pie with various forms of money, in other words, Ethereum, Solana, Dogecoin, Bitcoin Cash, etc., there's no one winner. And the idea is diluted. So his idea, Jack's Dorsey's, Twitter, for those people that don't know who Jack is one blockchain, one coin, one mission, one plan. Now, if you think of every major business in history, it normally works because of that exact construct. One avatar, one funnel, one message, one mission. Every single business that has worked because they've been so focused on those 4 key pillars. And that is what he's saying will happen if we just did that for Web 5. If we stop trying to cut the pie up by going, well, you have a coin, now I have a coin, and you have a digital asset, and I have a digital asset, and you're working on registration, and I'm working on registration. You're working on defraud, and I'm working on defraud, and all these things are just being broken up. There's no real opportunity for mass adoption. And what I think we're going to see now is Apple will be Web 5. Apple will say, hold on a second, we did it for podcasts, we did it for laptops, we did it for web pages, we will do it for our own currency, our own platform, and we'll make it for the people, by the people. In other words, multiple nodes all run by Apple computers that do a certain thing. Or maybe it will be Elon, Twitter, Jack, and Larry. Time will tell.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. I do have one question, probably doesn't have an answer, is what is Web4 and why no one talking about it? But we won't go there because we're really tight on time. So thank you very much to Jason and to Charles for speaking, to all of you for joining us. We have one more session left today, so thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you, Charles.